Sometimes we forget why we're here. It's easy to fall off track. These help us remember.
These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Growing up, I had a dream, something no one else could see. Tell me what it means when your faith is falling beneath your knees and you can't breathe. Everything you see reminds you of what you're not or something you won't be. You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business. Not because they wanna do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shame. And that's the reason I'm staying up late, trying to find a way to escape the stereotypes. This day and age is making me feel like the only way I'll be happy is getting signed to a label and making money through rapping. I wanna share my emotion because this world is attacking the very principle of life that lets the people be happy. If you don't have a reason to breathe, why even live? These battle scars are impressions of everything that it is.
Don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Now, if I had a voice that reached 100 million people, I'd tell them there's a reason that we're all created equal. Cause some decide to be great and some decide a sequel to an average person's life is simply what they want to be. So you make your decision, all I know is what I'm given. Won't define the life I lead or the way I dwell in existence. I've seen a greater image on the walls of where I'm living, and the words twisted and scripted remind me of something written. Faith is a gift that is given down to the people. If one believes it, one receives it. It's given if it is needed. Don't ever think you're trapped in a life that you never wanted. Your options are infinite, that's some mathematical logic. I'm not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers and these battle scars on my church. Not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers, these battle scars on my church.
Scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Well, hello everyone. Hopefully the sound is working. You know, I'm always paranoid about that. Got new wireless headsets, and anytime I switch anything, I'm always worried. And yes, my countdown timer wasn't correct. I don't know what happened there, but all right. It's been a hectic day, and I almost rescheduled this, but then I'd be like, everyone will be pissed off at me because I've been saying if you have any questions on some of the things I've been saying, show up today. Thank you, Dave, for letting me know you can hear me. It looked like everything was good. So what we're going to be talking about today, and I really would love interaction, as I got a lot of interaction on Facebook, a lot of pushback, and I'd rather respond to that pushback directly. It's much easier in real time. So we're going to be talking about the party membership pledge. Now, this is required for National Party membership. Some states also require it. Not all states require it. So this may only be of tangential interest to you, or it might be something that you signed off on. And there's a lot of confusion as to what the pledge means or what it is intended to mean. I'm not going to tell you what it's got to mean for you. I could only tell you what the intent was. And you could do with that what you will. I'm going to give you some pushback as to what the intent was as we go on. But I want to give you a bit of history. When I first got into this subject was prior to my getting really, really involved with studying the Statement of Principles. But when I first got involved, I loved the pledge. You know, it's one of the first things you come across when you come into the party. And I pretty much saw it as strictly an ideological, almost like litmus test. That's the way I saw it. That's certainly the way it seemed. It seemed like you signed off on a minimum, I have to use my church analogies, I'm sorry, like a minimum statement of faith. You know, when you go to a church, you know, the Nicene Creed or something. And I didn't have an issue with that. It seemed to me pretty straightforward. And I moved on. And then when you came across people who perhaps were advocating things that seemed to be against the pledge, a lot of people will bring out the pledge as a bludgeon saying you signed this and you violated it. And of course, there's nothing in our bylaws that has any teeth to the pledge. You know, we're not there's no provision to throw anyone out, okay? Let's just get that. And I'm glad of that, by the way. But even in debates, I think it's used in a way it was never intended to be used, at least not by the party, at least not when it was put into the bylaws. Let me just address this issue right up front in case I forget. Sometimes what something is intended to mean ends up becoming different than what later people interpret it to mean. And arguably, our bylaws are ratified every convention. So there's the question of what did it mean when it was put into the bylaws back in, it's been in there since the beginning. And what did it mean to the delegates each convention that didn't take it out? I mean, that does need to be considered. If they weren't aware of the intent and would have a problem with the intent, would they have kept it in, type of thing? I don't think they would have, but I don't think you can also simply say this was the intent. Because, again, the bylaws can be changed every convention. But I do think intent is very, very important. And I do believe they should, the pledge in the bylaws should keep its original intent. I know as far as, you know, there's been no official statement on this by the National Party recently, but I know as recently as Chair Steve Dasbach, there was a statement on it, and it kept true to the original intent. Also, I'm going to give some big disclaimers here. I'm not the party chair, the party secretary. I'm the minutes maid. I have absolutely no authority to speak on behalf of the party, but obviously I would never say anything that I think is contrary to the party position. I disagree with the party on numerous things, and I'm not shy to say I disagree. So I will do my best to faithfully represent what I believe, and I'm pretty absolutely sure the party position is. I can tell you, though, with some authority, what the historical position is. So with that, let's go on. And let's pull up here. So what does the pledge mean? Here's a letter, and I believe, I could get you the date on this. Maybe it's dated on the bottom, but I can look it up on another screen, which I probably should do because I think that's kind of relevant. I thought the date was right on the top here. But let me give you the background of this. Back when the Libertarian Party had started, the Libertarian, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit distracted. Let me not try to do two things at once because I've got ADHD. So, Libertarian Membership Pledge, I'm just looking that up on LPedia. This is all obviously up on LPedia, as nearly everything I use is. So, from David Aiken, there's the date here. 1 second. Yes. Okay, the date is January 20th, 1993. So this goes back a while. The Colorado membership requirements used to include the pledge, as stated up here, which is the National Pledge. I hereby certify that I do not believe in or advocate the initiation of force as a means of achieving political or social goals. Actually, I think that's a little bit different than the National Pledge, but it's close enough. And in the same document, we explained to Colorado libertarians what we felt the pledge meant, which is a little bit different than I think what David Nolan said. So Colorado said, what does the pledge on the membership form mean? We ask our members to disavow the initiation of force. This does not mean that you cannot defend yourself. You do have a right to defend your life, liberty, and property. It does mean that you cannot use the coercive power of government to forcibly achieve your personal, ethical, or religious goals. This commitment helps us maintain our principles and provides us with a measuring stick to determine if we have strayed from our common goal, a society where all relationships among persons are based on voluntary cooperation. Now, I believe all of that is true. Obviously, English words mean something. That is all true. But what is the purpose of us pledging this rather than just stating this? Because it's in the platform. It's also part of the statement of principles. Not quite as straightforward, but it is in the statement of principles. So here, Dave wrote Dave. So Dave Aitken is one of the OG libertarians in Colorado. He's the one who got us ballot access. So Dave Aitken wrote Dave Nolan and said, your comments would be appreciated, because he was concerned if we were properly representing it. So here is Dave Nolan's, you like how he signed his name? He put that little liber sign there that we've talked about. So here's what Dave Nolan said. Dave, this is a perfectly good exposition of what the pledge or oath means. And here's where we get next. This is what I really want to concentrate on. Interestingly, most people in the LP do not know why it was originally placed on the membership application. His writing's a little. We did it not because we believed that we could keep out bad people by making them sign or asking them to sign. After all, evil people will lie to achieve their goals. I'm sorry, I'm looking over at my screen. I didn't realize this writing was so bad for me. But to provide some evidence that the LP was not a group advocating violent overthrow of the government. In the early 1970s, memories of Nixon's enemies list and the McCarthy hearings of the 50s were still fresh in people's minds, and we wanted to protect ourselves from future witch hunts. Okay, sorry that writing, I should have prepared that. So the purpose, talk about the meaning. I think David Aitken perfectly summarized the meaning. Hold on, I gotta put my heater on. I'm down in the basement, it's chilly, and I've got wet hair because I just got out of the shower. Let me get this heater on. Okay, but why do we require the pledge? It is, as Dave Nolan said, but we're gonna expand upon that some more. There's another page, but I don't think it has anything on it. Yeah, it's just the envelope. We save everything at Ellopedia. And the Nolans lived in California at that time. Okay, let's go on to the next thing. And I will address comments in one moment. I see a couple have come up, and I do want this to be very interactive. How come my camera is not showing? Yay, figured it out. Okay. Libertarian Membership Pledge. This is the article that's on Ellopedia. You can all go take a look at it. If you, one second, I want to go back to the other screen because I thought the pledge in Colorado was a little different. I see the national one here. So let me go back to the first page. I just want to see if the wording was slightly different in Colorado. Yeah, here they said as a means of achieving. That is slightly different. I knew something like when, what? That's a little different. If you notice, the national pledge is to achieve rather than as a means of achieving. I mean, it's no difference in meaning. It's just, I knew something wasn't quite right. So the national pledge is, I certify that I oppose the initiation of force to achieve political or social goals. Actually, you know how I learn something each time? There's several differences here. Hold on a second. You guys now got me very, very interested. Let's see what the article says here. This little graphic isn't complete. I put that up there and I messed up. Here's the national pledge. Oh my God, get your shit together, Karen Ann. I hereby certify that, and it does say as a means. I'm such a dumbass. You want to know what? While I'm here, I'm going to delete that freaking graphic. That graphic is wrong. I hereby certify that I do not believe in or advocate the initiation of force as a means of, okay, achieving political or social goals. Okay, Colorado was right. Forget everything I just said prior to that. And this little part here is everything I had just explained to you guys. And dumb, I could have read it in nice handwriting here. And we go on to explain it some more here. Let me go to the next page of the PDF. And it talks about other references to the pledge. So I'm just going to go through this article, though, because I don't want to miss any context. And I've got it on my other screen here, which is easier for me to see. The pledge, where it go? Okay. Whether or not the pledge is primarily about keeping the party nonviolent and opposed to terrorist actions against the government, or is itself intended as a statement of the non-aggression principle, has been disputed. It's not disputed by David Nolan, the one who wrote it. Libertarians have variously argued that it is both. That's kind of what I argue. Or only one of the other. The above quote from Nolan appears to favor the view that the exigent purpose for requiring it as a condition of membership was to protect the party from accusations by the government. But it is also a description of the non-aggression principle or the non-initiation of force principle. Some libertarians believe that the pledge does not necessarily preclude violent action to resist tyranny, because tyrannical governments initiate force and therefore revolutionary acts qualify as self-defense. I don't believe that's correct. I mean, I'll qualify that. I believe the pledge precludes that. And I believe that was David Nolan's intent. But let's continue. A reference to the pledge was made on April 17th, 2001. And here's where I was talking about Steve Dosbach, a former chair. When in response to Timothy McVeigh's description of himself as a libertarian, he was the national director at the time. Pardon me, I thought he was chair. He ended up being chair later. Timothy McVeigh is not just a mass murderer. He's a very confused mass murderer. Besides having no appreciation for the value of human life, McVeigh apparently has no understanding of the meaning of the word libertarian. Just to set the record straight, real libertarians wholeheartedly reject the use of force to achieve political or social goals. Real libertarians see violence and try to prevent it, see problems and organize cooperative solutions, and see government abusing its power and work peacefully through the political system to protect our rights. I believe that Steve Dosbach had that absolutely correct with the intention of the pledge. And the rest of the article goes about controversies and attempts to change the pledge. That's not really our concern here today. Let me see if there's, I think that's it for that. Whoa, I don't want two of me. Yay, how are you doing, Karen? Let me get rid of you here. Bye. Go away. Oh, my scene's locked. Hold on one second. I am goofy. Goofy. Here we go. Okay, perfect. Now let me get to some of the questions, and then we're going to do one more piece of media, and we're going to talk about it some more. Let's go to the chat. Correct, Dave. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that, but I know the way I'm interpreting it, and I would agree. Our advocation of the non-aggression principle is what sets us apart. Now I'm going to put something up that I disagree with. I'm not so sure why it was stated. Maybe he could clarify, but for some reason, Emeric wanted to tell us he supported Trump. I think you're a very confused libertarian. No offense. It's my personal opinion. If you want to explicate why you thought you needed to tell us that, I would love to hear it. Now here's one more on point. Secession, I think, is a viable means to stop the cultural wars. Well, secession is rarely done peacefully. And when we're talking about the Libertarian Pledge, let me put it to you this way. When we're talking about the intent of the pledge, I don't believe it was intended in its position that libertarians do not advocate any violent means of reforming the government, abolishing the government, whatever you might think. I don't think it was intended to make a moral statement on whether or not that's ever justified. I believe what the intent of the pledge is, we're a political party, which means that we have committed ourselves to political goals. Political goals are not violent goals, and we're not going to get into the whole is voting violence. We're not getting into the weeds here. We're talking about, political parties are not about blowing shit up. And if you want to be involved with us as a political party, that should mean that you haven't yet reached the point where you think you need to go take up arms against the government. If that's the point you have gotten to, I don't believe the pledge is giving a moral statement on that. It could be justified. It might not be justified. However, it is not something we want anything to do with as a party. And if that's your mindset, you probably should not be in the party, because you signed a pledge saying that here's where it gets tricky. You signed a pledge saying you don't believe in it. Now, I don't think we're the thought police. What I believe is meant by that is that you don't believe that it is justified at this point, that there's still political avenues. If you don't believe that, I'm not going to tell you what to do. You might interpret the pledge differently, but I would urge you to consider it. Because if you did go out and do something, the party would absolutely denounce you. Because that is not what we're about. If the idea is, if it ever got to the point where it was quite obvious that that was the only solution, political parties would not be relevant. We would disband. We would dissolve. As long as we exist, we believe there's a peaceful solution, and we ask our members to get on board with that. If you're not on board with that, I'll honestly say you shouldn't be in the party. I'm not throwing you out. But you're in a collective. When you go into a voluntary group, it's a collective. And what you do, if you decide you're going to go blow up some government building, you bring everyone along with you with that. And we don't consent to that. I can't make some kind of predictive goal as to something you might do in the future, whether it's justified or not. I can just tell you it's not appropriate to us. And that is what the pledge is about. We are not a group that advocates the violent overthrow of the government. And it's not making a moral statement as to whether that's ever proper. Our platform acknowledges it's a right that you have. Doesn't mean that it's always a right you get to exercise, but it does. We say what the Declaration of Independence says. The people have the right to abolish the government. Governments very rarely get abolished peacefully. But that's not what we're doing as a political party. We would love to abolish it peacefully, or some of us would, I would, but violence is not what we're about. So, to get back to this, is secession morally viable? I believe people have a right, not just to secession of states, I believe you have a right all the way down to the individual. That really gets to it, doesn't it? I believe you have an individual political right of secession. Unfortunately, the government doesn't agree. And secession is rarely done peacefully. And that's something outside the scope of the Libertarian Party. Without a moral judgment. That's just, we're not about starting a civil war. Emeric clarified, he, meaning President Trump, had nothing to do with what happened yesterday. I'm not going to make any kind of statement on that. I think that's incorrect. It doesn't mean that he told them to do it, but obviously it had something to do with it. They were carrying Trump flags. That doesn't mean that I'm saying moral culpability or anything, but come on, don't overstate your case. Obviously it had something to do with Trump. That's ridiculous. That'd be saying like Biden had nothing to do with it. Obviously Biden had something to do with it too. I mean, if you want to get into responsibility and things like that, okay, but it's a lot more nuanced than what you just said. And yes, let's get a libertarian governor. I'm not in Maryland, but let's do it. I'm with you on that. Let's get one in Colorado too while we're at it. If you have that power, come help us too. So to move on a little bit, do I think there are Chinese spies in the top 3 political parties to infiltrate American politics? I think there's probably spies from every country. I wouldn't limit it to Chinese spies. And I think we have spies probably in the political parties of other governments. That's what governments do. So to me, that's like saying, do you think water is wet? Let me bring it home a little more. Do I think there are government spooks in the Libertarian Party? Absolutely. And I think there are ones in the Republican and Democrats too. I just think that's what governments do. And in the early party, I think it was pretty definite we were being spied upon. So yeah, the question is yes, but I wouldn't limit it to Chinese. I think any country that has the power to do so has probably done so, particularly in American politics, because, right now we're pretty important. They probably don't infiltrate the political parties in Dalmatia or something like that, but they might. When do I think it's necessary to take violence against a tyrannical state such as ours? Where do I draw the line? You're asking me a personal question. I'm a pacifist. I don't ever believe taking up violence is necessary or justified. It's a religious position I have, so I'm not going to give you satisfaction there. As far as a libertarian answer, I don't know. I think it's a case of that infamous quote from one of the justices on the Supreme Court about pornography. You'll know it when you see it. But I'm a pacifist, so I can't even meaningfully answer that question because it's just so foreign to me. I could just say in the abstract, it is justified at some point. But I can't tell you when because for me, it's never justified. But I would say some of the hallmarks of that point is that there's no other avenue. And there are other avenues right now. So the broad answer is, it's not right now, in my opinion. Okay, Dave qualified. We can use the pledge against Democrats and Republican candidates because they have not stated whether or not they advocate using violence against the United States government. I don't think I agree there. I think that would be quite weird to most people. The reason people worry about us is because we're anti-government. And that people wonder what that means. The Democrats and Republicans aren't anti-government, so I don't think anyone is worried about them at all. In the same way, people might be worried about us. Yes, I understood that, Ryan. It's just that it rarely happens. Yeah, I advocate every single day for peaceful secession, all the way down to the individual. Okay, let me see here. We're good. I want to really keep to the pledge here. So like some of the Amash for Michigan type things, I'm skipping by it. No disrespect. I'm just trying to keep on the subject. Christopher had a great question. I kind of addressed that, but perhaps I wasn't clear. Let me take a sip here. I earlier had said our platform says people have the right to that. So I don't think it's ambiguous. What our pledge says, if you're joining us as a member, you believe and advocate that we're not at that point. So those two are not mutually exclusive. And as far as this, I think every realistic person knows that governments usually don't go peacefully. Sometimes they do, but rarely. Okay, so that's it for the chat. I am now going to play a clip from the man who wrote the pledge, just to clarify further exactly what he meant by that. Hopefully this works properly.
First, just a clarification. I think many people, probably 90% of you, are unaware of the reasoning behind the creation of the pledge against initiation of force, the thing that we all signed to join the National Party. When we first came up with that, way back in the early days, and put it on our party applications, everybody was well aware of the fact that, you know, somebody who is a raving Marxist psychopath could come in and willfully lie and sign that thing. By signing a piece of paper, you don't necessarily change reality. And incidentally, libertarians are probably, as a group, more prone to believing that you can change things by putting words on paper than any other group of people I've ever known. None of us were so naive as to believe that you could prevent some kind of raving lunatic from being a raving lunatic and prevent them from joining the Libertarian Party and being a raving lunatic within our organization just by putting those words on a piece of paper and having them sign them. The idea behind it, and it's probably more valid today than it was then, was that if the time ever comes when, you know, the bad guys come to get us, as the McCarthy witch hunt era in the 50s, when they were out after, quote, communists, many of whom were communists, and say the libertarians are bad people, they're anarchists, they want to destroy America, we could say, perfectly honestly, we are the only political party in America that requires our members to certify that they don't want to overthrow the government by force. It's there to show good faith and for our own protection if we ever are persecuted unjustly for being people who want to bring about change through force. No, it doesn't prevent somebody who has that worldview from signing it, knowing full well that they have no intention of honoring it. I would therefore urge us to keep it simply as a self-protective device.
Okay, wait, what? Didn't want to go to that scene. Okay, here we go. All right, so that was 1989. You saw that was the 89 convention. The reason he was addressing it is probably because somebody wanted to get rid of it, as they do. People generally want to get rid of it, not because they want to violently overthrow the government, is because, oh, I have not the best opinions on that particular subject. They think, you know, people, it's scary and we'll get more members. Listen, somebody don't want to sign that, I'm fine with them not being a member, personally. You know, you can't do that. No, thank you. Not today, Satan. Okay, well, I'm surprised that some of the people, I'm not getting the pushback here that I got on Facebook, so I'm going to try to remember some of the objections. But we heard it from the horse's mouth. You can not like what David said. You can disagree with what David said. But it's what he said. It was his intention. Now, and it was affirmed by the National Party, you know, the last time, fortunately, that we had to do that was in the Timothy McVeigh incident. Now, some people want to quibble and say that the pledge does not preclude the just or justified violent action against the government. Well, David Nolan disagrees with you. I would say that the intent is the same. You might not have been aware of it, now you are. And what they'll do is focus on the word initiation and say, well, the government's initiating force against us. No doubt. But there is something besides the non-aggression principle. There's also things called proportionality and a philosophy of mitigation of aggression. If you're going to say that the predations of the state justify violent action, how far are you going to take that? You voting is violence, people. Do you think you can go shoot your neighbor because they voted for Biden? I hope not. Though they voted for something that could, in a sequence of events, lead to your death. If you resist whatever kind of shitty policies he's going to impose. You know, I saw people on my Facebook post who were using the whole idea of, well, this is defense, it's not initiation of force, for justifying political assassinations. Here's the thing. You don't need to agree with me, but I think it's a valid thing to consider. It's one thing to consider issues of force, retaliation, defense, in this pure, sterile, clean slate, theoretical world that doesn't exist. We don't live in that world. And by analogy, it's going to be an imperfect analogy. Okay? All analogies are. If someone violated your property rights unknowingly, could you use violence against them? Some people would say yes. I would say no, because I think knowledge and intent matters. Well, we've grown up indoctrinated in the religion of the state. Your neighbor does not know by voting for Biden, they could indirectly be advocating for you to get shot one day. Or voting for Trump. I'm not meaning to pick on one. I'm only pick Biden because he's the guy who won. Whether you like it or not, I don't believe there was voting fraud. I believe he won, and I'm not getting into that. So, is there the mental, the mens rea, in legal terms, to justify assassinating a politician who might not even realize what they're doing is wrong? Though, no, I don't think there is. And we certainly don't advocate that as a party, and we don't want any part of that as a party. But these weird theoretical constructs people are coming up with, that's not the world we live in. And I don't think that is just. Now, when you start getting into issues, we're going to violently overthrow the government type thing, not everyone consents to that. Don't argue with me that it will never... I'm sorry, all violent revolutions involve the initiation of force. They just do. By nature. It doesn't mean all of the force would be considered initiation of force. But unless every single person in the country agrees with you in which case you wouldn't need the violent revolution, you are going to be infringing upon people's consent. Because I can tell you, if you want to violently overthrow the government, I don't fucking consent. And your actions will have aggression against me. So don't fool yourself. All violent revolutions involve the initiation of force. Period. There are no clean hands in revolutions unless you've all agreed. And if you've all agreed, it's not necessary. So people then ask me, what about the American Revolution? Was it justified? Here's the problem with revolutions. There's no clean hands on any side. And when you get into a no clean hands situation, it's hard to give a yes or no. You can only judge certain individual actions. Yeah, I believe it's valid to rebel against a king. But you know, the revolutionaries weren't in the majority in America. There were a lot of people who force was initiated against by the patriots. It's messy. That's why I advocate political secession down to the individual. Because only the individual can consent. Now, is that a utopian vision? Maybe. But since we're dealing in this theoretical purity that you all want to talk about, if you want to talk about reality, we can go there and try to best apply libertarian principles in the very messy reality we find ourselves in. But don't lie to yourselves and don't lie to me that if you go out and foment political violent overthrow of the government that you're not initiating force, because you are against somebody. And that's probably a big reason why the party's against it. But also, politics are useless if force is on the table. Pick one. So, I believe I've faithfully represented the party position. I've tried to clearly delineate when I was saying my own opinion, though it's all my own opinion because I'm not a party spokesperson, but on things that you know what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to get overly pedantic here. That the pledge, I believe the intent remains today, that it is a pledge that at this time you do not believe in or advocate the violent overthrow of the government. If you do, I think you need to reconsider your involvement with the LP, because that's not what we're all about. We don't need that shit, man. Now, I'm not telling you to go. I don't have any authority to do that. I can't tell you what to think. You may interpret the pledge differently. But I can tell you for damn sure, if you went out and did something like that, you'd see your political party denouncing you. So this is just food for thought and discussion, and to let you know where I believe the National Party stands. I know, now let's get into more current things. Do I think the National Party's been a bit hypocritical and not quickly denouncing the left violence? Of course. I haven't been shy about that. But I don't think it's very mature to excuse violence from the right by going, but they got away with it. That children do that, not adults. And that's basically what I have. And I think I've attempted to address the objections that were in Facebook. Maybe we'll do an episode 2 if people would like to talk about it more. I'm hoping this conversation doesn't need to continue. We don't know what's going to happen. If you want my personal opinion, I think what happened at the Capitol is going to be a one-off event. I think the government is... Listen, you do things like that, it's not going to turn out well for you. whatever. I don't think we're headed into quote unquote civil war. I don't. And I can tell you, if you're a libertarian or you are in some position where you get to speak for the LP and you're even giving a hint that civil war is appropriate, and I don't care if it's just a fucking hashtag, cut that shit out. Because that's not what we're all about. And you don't have the right to do that under the LP name. If you want to do those sorts of things, say it has nothing to do with the party. Because it doesn't. Okay, well, that's all I have then. I'm going to be scooting. I have a county affiliate meeting this evening. I'm the secretary of the Libertarian Party of Douglas County, Colorado. And I've got to get the agenda written up. So thank you all for hanging out with me. I hope you found that informative and provocative for thought and further discussion. I hope you have an awesome day, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.
You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians or choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business.